Ever imagine yourself like up in front of a classroom, you know, getting young minds all psyched about chemistry? Well, you're in the right place.
Absolutely.
We're doing a deep dive into what it really takes to be a chemistry lecturer. We're
Yeah.
using this in-depth career guide from RoleCatcher.
Cool.
Think of it like a shortcut to figure out if this whole chemistry lecturer thing is, actually your dream job, not just some periodic table daydream.
And let me tell you, it's not just about memorizing that periodic table, even though that's, kind of important.
Right, like there's more to it than that.
This guide digs way deeper, gives us tons to talk about.
Oh, it totally does.
Mm-hmm.
So first things first, they dive into what chemistry lecturers actually do. You'd think it's all like lectures and test tubes and stuff,
Right.
but it's like way more than that, right?
It is. It's this blend, right? You're teaching, which we all get, but you're also digging into your own research. You're part of this whole academic community. It's actually really dynamic, really engaging, and you got to have a certain energy for it. Does that sound like something you connect with?
Yeah, it sounds like you got to be really into sharing what you know,
Yeah.
A&D,
Yeah.
constantly learning new stuff.
Yes.
It's like you're keeping that curiosity alive in yourself and your students.
Exactly. This isn't the gig for someone who just wants to do the same thing every day. And the guide, it actually does a great job of painting a picture of the work environment, too. It's all labs and classrooms and conferences. Does that kind of setting get you fired up?
Oh, for sure. I mean, labs and classrooms, that's like the classic image.
It's cool, right?
Yeah. But one thing that I always think about with like academia is the whole work-life balance thing.
Yeah.
The guide mentions chemistry lecturers, they often have crazy long hours.
Yeah.
Is that something you've actually experienced yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Especially early on in my career, man, I practically lived in the lab. But here's the thing. Those late nights, fueled by, terrible coffee and some really exciting research problem, those led to some of the coolest breakthroughs in my career. So it's about finding those strategies, to manage your time, set realistic expectations, and build a support network within your department. Seriously, you'd be surprised how many people are in the same boat.
So it's not just you alone in a lab coat at 2 a.m.
Not at all.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so the guide also mentions a 9% job growth outlook, which sounds pretty good on the surface.
Right.
But how does that actually play out in such a competitive field?
That's where it gets really interesting. Because while 9% is better than a lot of other fields, you got to be strategic. The guide talks about really diving deep into specific areas of chemistry that are blowing up right now.
Okay.
Like nanotechnology, for example. Where do you see your interests, potentially fitting in with these cutting edge areas?
Yeah, it's like finding your niche, that sweet spot where your passion meets what the research world actually needs right now.
Exactly.
And I guess location probably matters a lot too, right?
For sure.
Like some places probably have way more research institutions than others.
You got it. It's about being smart, being strategic. Don't just focus on the general demand for chemistry lectures. Think about where those lecturers are most needed and what makes you stand out in that crowd.
It's like you said, that energy, that unique thing you bring.
Yes. What's going to make you stand out in a sea of applicants?
Right, right. Okay, so the guide doesn't sugarcoat things, though. It talks about job stability being a big plus for people wanting to be lecturers, which, let's face it, that's huge these days.
The big deal.
But then there's that whole publish or perish pressure. Was that something you struggled with, early in your career?
Oh, totally. It's the double-edged sword of academia, right? On one hand, it pushes you to do your best, to innovate, to be at the top of your game.
Right.
But it can definitely lead to burnout if you're not careful. I remember when I first started, I had this research project, right? Fascinating stuff, all about reaction kinetics. But I was so swamped with prepping for lectures and trying to get my own work published. It felt like I was drowning in deadlines.
Yeah, I bet.
Finding mentors in my department, people who'd been there, done that made all the difference for me. They helped me figure out what to focus on, how to strategize, and to just remember why I fell in love with chemistry in the first place.
Mentors are like those seasoned adventurers who give you the treasure map and a compass for the academic wilderness.
Exactly. And speaking of navigating, the guide actually lays out a pretty clear path for a chemistry lecturer. Did you find that helpful at all? It's like a sneak peek into what each stage could look like, from brand new lecturer to head honcho of the department.
Totally. It's one thing to say, I want to be a chemistry lecturer, right?
Right.
But actually seeing those different stages and what you're really doing day to day at each level, it makes it feel way more real.
Right. It's like, okay, so maybe I start out assisting those senior lecturers with their research. Maybe you're still working on your own fancy degree.
Yeah, yeah.
Busy, but doable. Then as you get more experience, you start leading your own courses, you're mentoring new faculty, maybe even running your own research group. Seeing that progression makes it way less intimidating.
For sure. And the guide gives these example profiles, which I thought were super helpful.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, they describe an entry-level lecturer as someone who's, like, obviously passionate about chemistry and teaching,
of course.
but also someone who's, like, psyched to contribute to research, someone who's all about that collaborative environment. Does that sound like you?
That's it. That's the picture. And remember, early on, you're still figuring it out,
Yeah.
right? Both the teaching and the research side. Don't be scared to ask questions, get advice from those more experienced colleagues. It's okay to make mistakes. It's all part of the process.
Embrace those learning curves.
Exactly.
Now, when you look at, like, a senior chemistry lecturer, the guide describes someone who's not just, like, a good teacher.
Mm.
They're a respected researcher, a mentor to those junior faculty, often a leader in their field.
Mm-hmm.
It's impressive.
It really is about always pushing yourself to grow, to contribute at those higher levels. And the guide talks about this too, how crucial continuous learning is in this field. Chemistry doesn't sit still, so you're never really done learning.
And it's not just like reading all the latest research papers, right? The guide talks about going to conferences, being in professional
It's
organizations.
all important.
But then they mentioned something I thought was really interesting, following good chemistry blogs, even social media.
It's true. Some of the most interesting conversations about new discoveries, about the challenges in the field that's happening online. Plus, it's a great way to connect with other chemists all over the place, share what you're working on, stay inspired.
It's like having a virtual lab meeting with some of the brightest minds in chemistry, but on your phone.
Exactly.
Okay, so we talked before about the publish or perish pressure.
Hmm.
The guide has some good tips on handling that, especially when it comes to, getting funding for your work. What really stood out to you in that section?
They really hit on the importance of building a strong network. Working with researchers from different fields is becoming so important, not just for sharing knowledge, but also for getting those research grants.
So it's not enough to just be brilliant in the lab by yourself anymore.
It's not enough.
You got to connect with those other brilliant minds, find that overlap where you can do even cooler stuff together.
Exactly. Don't underestimate conferences and workshops either. They're your chance to show off your work a bit, get feedback from your peers, maybe even spark a new collaboration, Who knows what could come out of that?
It's like the guide is saying, go out there and let your passion be known.
Right.
You never know who's listening or how your research could spark something amazing.
Exactly. It's about being part of something bigger than just you, contributing to that big pool of knowledge, inspiring the next group of scientists. That's what it's all about.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked about the reality of being a chemistry lecturer day to day, the career path, those essential skills,
We've covered a lot.
even how to rock that interview. Before we wrap up our deep dive, was there anything else in this section that really resonated with you?
One thing that I think gets overlooked is how many different paths you can take with a love of chemistry. This guide focuses on being a lecturer, which is awesome, but it's not the only game in town. What if teaching's not your thing, but you love research? You could be a research scientist for a company or even a government lab.
Oh, for sure.
Or maybe you're all about sharing science with everyone, not just students. There are so many options out there.
It really is like a whole periodic table of career paths, but it all starts with that love of chemistry.
It does.
And that's so important because it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. But okay, for those listening who are feeling that pull toward the lecture hall, the guide goes deep on the skills and stuff that make a chemistry lecturer really good at it. It's got to be about more than just like knowing your stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely. It goes way beyond just like having a deep understanding of chemistry, the facts and figures. It's about taking that knowledge and actually being able to communicate it effectively.
Totally.
Spark that aha moment in your students. Think about it. Who was that teacher that made you love a subject? They were probably an amazing communicator, right?
Oh, for sure. They could make those like super complex concepts actually make sense, finding creative ways to explain things.
Yeah.
Using real-world examples because, not everyone sees the world in chemical equations right away.
Exactly. And teaching isn't just about lecturing either. You got to design cool lab experiments, make the classroom like a place where stuff is happening, and get your students to think for themselves, solve problems on their own. You're not just a textbook dispenser. You're nurturing that love for discovery.
You're like passing the torch, but maybe lighting it on fire a little first.
Exactly. Get them excited.
Yeah. The guy also mentions organization as being super key, which makes sense when you're juggling lectures, labs, your own research, mentoring. Any tips from your own experience on, like, how to stay afloat?
Time management, my friend, becomes your everything. You gotta prioritize like crazy. Set those deadlines and don't be afraid to delegate. Remember those teaching assistants. They are there to help you. Not just to grade papers either. They can help run those labs, give feedback on assignments, even brainstorm new teaching ideas with you.
Delegation. It's like the chemistry lecturer's secret weapon.
It is.
Okay, but let's talk about something else the guy digs into that I thought was interesting abstract thinking. Why is that so important for a chemistry lecturer? It seems like it's a field where you're dealing with, like, concrete facts and formulas and stuff.
Right, and that's where it gets really cool. Yes, chemistry has its rules, its equations, but at its core, it's about really getting those underlying principles. How does matter actually behave? It's seeing the patterns, making those connections, and then using that to solve real problems, developing new materials, new medicines, all of it.
So you need that big picture thinking to make those connections, to see the forest for the trees.
Yes, you got it.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that can make or break your journey to becoming a chemistry lecturer, the interview.
Ah,
The RoleCatcher guide has some good advice on how to totally rock those interviews, which I know can be a little nerve-wracking. So let's say you're sitting there across from, like, a panel of professors. What kind of questions should you be ready for?
the guide does a really good job of laying out the common questions, and honestly, they give you a good idea of what the hiring committee is really looking for. Be ready to talk about your passion for chemistry, what got you into it, how you stay updated on the research. They'll want to know about your teaching style, how you handle those tougher students, even your experience with mentoring.
So it's about more than showing off what you know.
Way more.
It's about showing your enthusiasm, your ability to connect with people, how you fit into that whole academic community.
Yes. And don't forget, you're interviewing them too. Do their research interests vibe with yours? What's the department culture like? Is it supportive? Don't be shy about asking them questions too.
Right. Find that academic home that feels right.
Yeah.
It's like finding the right lab partners. You want people who are going to challenge you, have your back, and maybe, share your coffee addiction.
That's a good one. It's about finding your people in the chemistry world.
Totally. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have.
We've talked about what it's really like to be a chemistry lecturer day to day, the whole career path, the skills you need, even nailing that interview. It's been super helpful, even for me.
It's been great diving into this with you. The RoleCatcher Guide really is a fantastic resource for anyone thinking about this path.
It is. But remember, a guide can only take you so far. It's your passion for chemistry that's going to really fuel your journey. So as you keep exploring this field, keep that passion alive. Don't stop asking questions, don't stop experimenting, and never forget how much of an impact you can have as a chemistry lecturer, inspiring that next generation of scientists. Maybe someday you'll be the one writing the career guide. Who knows? That's all for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.